Hi, I'm going to show you how to make a quick and easy Blizzard Buster knitted hat today. It's very easy to knit, and once you get rolling on them, you can probably get one done in an hour and a half or 2 hours. So that's my kind of project. I have this little band here, and it's a row of knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. You do that like 4 times. Then the 9th row, you just have like an increasing row where you add a few stitches, and then from there on out, it's just plain knitting. And what it uses is a called a super bulky yarn. This one's made from Bazinga, and it's got some thick and thin qualities. There's some really thin stuff here, but then it gets big and bulky like roving. This works out really well, and this is a hat made from that. There's also a good one called Brunello, which also has thick and thin qualities, and that comes out a little bit differently. Let me show you that hat. And since it has a lot of lumpy spots, we have quite a different look for the same exact pattern. This also has the little band here, and then just plain knitting, but the thick and thin of the Brunello gives you these little bumps and boggles, and they're kind of fun. Interesting look. Also, you can use something here called Adriaphil. This is called Bonus Trends, and it's real hairy. It's a lot of fun to work with. It also comes out a little different though. It comes out a lot bigger. And it's a fluffy hat, so you have to adjust your stitches a little bit, but you might find someone that you know that can wear a hat like that. Super bulky, this hat pattern will work for. The other thing I tried is, if I put 3 strands of worsted weight yarn together, you can make your own super bulky, and so that's what this hat is made from. 3 strands knitted at once. And also, let's see, this one's the same thing. I used 3 different colors, 2 greens and a variegated kind of self-striping yarn in a gold, and it came out the same way. This nice cushy band here makes it fit really snug to your head, and having a little bit of an increase in the crown makes it fit your hair without squishing it too bad. Keeps you warm. This is also another Bazinga hat, and it's same stuff that the blue is made out of. And lastly, I tried something from Hobby Lobby. It's called the Yarn Bee Soft Illusion Super Bulky, and it comes with like 87 yards in there, so you really don't need to use more than 1 ball. All of the others come in about 49 yards, and you need like a ball and a half, so you always have to buy 2. But with this Soft Illusion stuff, it only needed 1 ball, and it was a self-striping yarn, but how this is the knitted row with the pearls in it, and then this was the way the yarn is made. It sort of made stripes in the hat, so that's kind of cool. Anyway, it all fits the same way. It's got this nice cushy band here, and it's a very warm hat. Okay, so you need the yarn and you need your pattern, but I'm going to pretty much tell you everything you need to know today. But the pattern is available on the Ravelry, and at the bottom of my segment here we'll have a place where you can go to get the pattern if you'd like. You also need 1 stitch marker. Okay, and I use these kind that I make myself. This little ring that goes on there can come apart, so if you get it stuck in your hat or in your yarn, you can always just take it apart and get it out without having to cut your yarn. We have these on our website, greensquiltingandweavingshop.com, but we also have them on eBay, and we'll have some links for you for that. Okay, you'll also need to have some knitting needles, and it's a 16 circular. When I use dark yarn, I like to use light color needles, and when I use light yarn, I like dark. It's just easier to see. So this is a size 11 US, otherwise it's called a 8mm, and you can get those just about anywhere, your favorite knitting store or hobby place. And also you're going to need a needle to just stitch the top of your hat closed. I also have tape measure because part of our pattern is going to show you how to get the right height and everything. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and show you how to cast on. I make a loop, give it a little twist, and then grab the yarn and just make a slip knot. There's lots of ways to cast on, but that's just the easiest for me. So I'm not going to put it on the needle very tight. Now I'm going to cast on a total of 35 stitches. So that's one, and I'll just put 35 on. And just put the needle in and pull it around. Now when I got this little tail left here, a lot of times, normally you're told to just weave that in at the end. I like to weave it in the beginning because then I don't have to worry about it. So I take the tail and I wrap it around my yarn, and then I do my cast on, pull it through, and put it on the needle. Then I take my little tail, wrap it around this piece of yarn, wrap around, pull it through, and slip it on. So now I've got 4 stitches there. This goes very fast because the yarn is really thick, and in no time at all you'll have 35 stitches. Alrighty, so this is number 35. Okay, now we have all these stitches on here and they're not twisted. Okay, notice how like this little line here goes right around. We don't want to find any of this kind of stuff because that's not going to work right when you get your brim going. So be very careful not to twist anything. And since there is only 35, they just barely fit on here. Okay, so it shouldn't be a real problem. They're not crammed on. What I do with this little tail is, since I've woven it in for like an inch or so, I'm just going to trim that off at the end. I won't have to weave that in anymore. Okay, now there's a little trick I'd like to show you. I'll get all these stitches pushed up to both needles. And a lot of times when I would make a hat, it would have a little dip in the edge, like where I joined the two together. And there would be like a little dip. So what I do now is, this is the way the needles were when I added the yarn, cast it on. I'm going to turn them over. So my cast on yarn is here now. And I'm going to take the very first stitch I put on, and I'm going to move it over to this other needle. And you might like to do this with other hats that you make now that you know this little trick, because it keeps the dip from happening in the... Okay, so now I've brought the first cast on stitch over to the last cast on stitch. I'm going to add my stitch marker on here. And now I have this yarn that is coming under. I want to just sort of stuff that through so that the yarn stays on the back. And I'm going to knit the first stitch. But as I'm pulling, I'm going to pull. I usually don't pull when I start things, but this one, I want these to be very close together. So I'm going to yank on that one a little bit as I knit my first stitch. And what that does is it stops the gap. And you'll see as we get further on, it'll really help the shape of the hat. Okay, so I'm going to knit the first row. Alrighty, so I'm just going to put the needle in, wrap it around, and pull it through. And then I'm just going to very carefully push these stitches on the needle towards the needle that I'm knitting with. The first row is a little stiff because things aren't real stretched out yet. I'm going to make sure we don't twist any of those stitches. Okay, and just kind of advance them along. So I do like 2 or 3 till I can't get it anymore. Push it, and then just sort of advance them along. Don't stretch this point too much because that's where that beginning gap will be. And then just work your way along. Okay, and we're going to knit that first row out. Alrighty, we're almost at the end of this row now. And you just have to be careful to keep these close together, okay, because this pink one here is our first cast on stitch. And then we've got to slide this stitch marker over and get it around the yarn so it's hanging freely. Alright, and now we're on our next row. So our next row is going to be purling. So you put your needle in the front of the stitch, wrap it around, and pull it through. And we're just going to purl this next row. The stitches are already becoming looser and much easier to knit now, and that's how it's always going to be the rest of the hat until you get to the top. So that first row is just always a tough one, but now it's sliding easier, everything's going well, and it's very comfortable and fast and fun. Okay, so I'm going to knit this, or I'm going to purl this next row. Okay, so I finished purling that row. I get to the stitch marker again and I push it up and over on the other needle, keep it freely hanging there. Try not to get it wrapped in this yarn. Okay, now the rest of the brim is just 3 more sets of just what we did. So I'm going to knit and purl 3 more sets of rows. So there'll be a total of 8 rows altogether. Knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. Okay, so I'm going to complete that and then I'll meet you back here when it's time to do the increase row. Okay? Okay, well that went really fast. We've got our 8 rows done. Knit and purl, knit and purl, knit and purl, knit and purl. And then where our hat begins, we get a nice straight edge here because of that little trick we used. If you use some yarn that's all consistently the same size, you won't have this little problem, but we've got like the thick and thin, and going from thick and thin you get like a little bit of a change there, but it really doesn't affect the hat look, and that's the way the yarn is, so that's okay. Now when we go to the row 9, we're going to increase the so we get a little bit of a puffier hat, so your head fits in there and your hair doesn't get too mashed down. So what we're going to do is we're going to knit 4 stitches, and then in the 5th stitch we're going to do the increase. So I'll show you that now. Okay, so we're going to knit 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now to do the increase, we're going to knit once in the front and once in the back of the same stitch. So in the front we go, wrap and pull it through, and we're not going to pull it off the needle yet. We're going to twist around to the back, put the needle in, wrap around and pull through. Now we've got 2 stitches from this 1 stitch, okay, and then we're going to pull it off. Now we have just done an increase. Now we're going to go around and do that until the end. So when we're finished, instead of 35 stitches, we're going to have 42 stitches, okay? So we're going to knit 4. And then we're going to knit in the front and in the back of that same stitch. 2 stitches on the needle and slide it off. Okay, I'll do it again. And since there's only a few stitches on this needle, it's not going to take long to get all the way around. Okay. Knit in the front and in the back. In the front and in the back. In the front and in the back. And we're almost around. Okay, and it worked out. We got 1 stitch left, and we're going to knit in the front and in the back. You know what, if you happen to have added an extra stitch or something and you get an extra one at the end here because you didn't count right or whatever, it's not a big deal. It's a very forgiving hat, and you can just knit it right in. Okay, this one worked out right because the math was right for the stitches, and I had the right number of stitches because I counted it 15 times. But anyway, if you end up with, you know, an extra stitch there, it's not going to be a big deal. Okay, alrighty, so now we're going to knit around, and we're going to knit and knit and knit every row until we get to 7.5 inches. So we are going to measure from the brim to the last row of our stitching, and we want that to be 7.5 inches, and then we'll start to make the crown. Okay, so I'll meet you back after I've got all my knitting done, but it's just straight knitting, row after row after row, around and around and around. When your yarn runs out, you just tie a knot and stick the knot, in the back, kind of weave in the ends if you can a little bit as you go. And then the thing is, like, what's fun is about this Ravelry yarn, or not Ravelry, I'm sorry, the Bazinga yarn and any of the others, if you don't happen to have the same exact ball of color, like, because I don't, I have one that has some of these pinks in, I'm just going to add this one on, and I'll just keep getting really cool different colors. So it just can be a fun thing. And these are great hats for donations, like to fire companies and homeless shelters, police departments, because when they need to keep people warm, they need like a lot of variety, probably of sizes and stuff for different kinds of people and kids. And these would make up really nice and they don't take you very long. And the yarn is not that expensive, and a lot of times you can find it on sale. And even if you use the kind of hat where you use 3 strands of worsted, you can use up your scraps in them. And they would definitely be appreciated by anyone. And they also make really great fast gifts. So I'm going to keep knitting around here, and I'll meet you back when I get to my 7.5 inches. Okay, so now we have our hat that measures 7.5 inches from the very bottom of the needles to the edge of the hat at the bottom. And now we're going to do the last 5 rows to bring the crown in to make it more into a more fitted hat. Now, normally in this case you would use some double pointed needles, and that would help you like get it tighter and tighter. In this case, since this is such a loose and bulky yarn, I'll show you a little trick I use to just not even bother with the DPNs. Okay, so let's see, I'm going to knit my last stitch here. Okay, now I move the stitch marker. That's going to be important at this point because I need to know when I stopped, where my next row starts. So I'm going to knit 5 and then knit 2 together. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, push them down a little. Now I'm going to take the next 2 stitches and put my needle under the second one and then under the first one. So I've got 2 on there. Okay, wrap the yarn and pull through. So that's knitting 2 together, and we're going to do that until the end. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and knit 2 together. So a lot of yarn to be pulling through, but there you go. Okay, we'll do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and knit 2 together. We want to make sure we don't split the yarn. Sometimes it takes a try or 2 with that much. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And get those 2 together. The closer you get it to that tip, the better off you are, because it is narrow and sometimes you get a better shot at it. Okay, that's 5. I'm going to knit 2 together. Okay, and then there's the last 2. Knit 2 together. And then move the stitch marker. Now for the next row, we're going to knit 4 and then knit 2 together. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and knit 2 together. Now, if you think you got lost and you lost your count, you need to be able to tell where you were. Okay, so here we go, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then when we knit these two together, you can see where 2 stitches are kind of bumped up to each other. Then we got 1, 2, 3, 4, and now we know we need to knit 2 together. I hate when I get phone calls and things like this when I'm doing this part, because I never fails. I always get one, and then I have to go back and try to figure out where I was. So it's not too hard, but you know, just so you can see that those 2 stitches, when they're knit together, they look a little different than the single ones. Alright, just got a couple more. This is the last set. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we'll knit those 2 together. Alrighty, we're getting there. Move the stitch marker. And now we do knit 3 and then knit 2 together. 1, now you might start noticing that it's a little less room on the needles and stuff, so you have to just keep, you know, working them, keep pushing them towards the tip of the needle. Alright, we're almost there. Alright, then the last set. 1, 2, 3. And knit 2 together. Alright, we only have 2 more rows to go. Okay, so move the stitch marker, and then we knit 2 and then knit 2 together. 1, 2, knit 2 together. Okay, now as we get down to the lower numbers here, the 2, knit 2 and then knit 2 together, there will be less space for us to get in there and use the needles well. So I'll show you a little thing I do once I get down where it's too tight. Now this is the point actually when you would use those double pointed needles, because you're getting tighter and tighter and there's less and less stitches. And the double pointed needles, they like help you get a nice, you know, rounded, smaller close of the opening, okay? But when I get down to where I'm struggling, I'll show you what I do. Just because it is for such a very short time that it's probably not worth it to get those DPNs out. Okay. Alright, now here's knit 2 together. Knit 2, and I can still do it. Alright. Alright, now this last one gets a little tight, so I'm going to pull this needle and slide all the stitches down on the cable, okay? Now, these last two, I want to get under them, and I have my thread back here, my yarn, and I don't want to like wrap it now, because I'll be leaving a really long piece of yarn here. I don't want to do that, so I squish these together. I also don't want to pull on this because it'll make my stitch smaller and it won't fit back on the needle. So I squish these two together, leave a little looseness but not too much because I want a hole. Wrap it around, pull it through, and that was much easier. And now I can just lift it and slide it back down on the cable. Okay? Now for the last step, the very last row, we're just going to knit two together all the way around. You could, at this point, take it off of the needles and just close it with a cinch, but I like it to get just a little tighter because you get more of this like star kind of look at the top of the hat. I'll show you another one here. This one too, you can really see it because the yarn happened to change color there, and you got a cute little flower or star kind of hat, and that same kind of thing happens in all of these if you can get it down just one more row. Okay, so I got them, all my stitches slid down on the cable. I'm going to hold them close together, and I'll put a couple of stitches up there on the needle. Alrighty, and we'll just knit two together all the way around. I don't want to yank on this because I don't want to shorten up that yarn, so you just delicately, you know, hold them together. And sometimes I can get maybe 2 times when I knit two together like that, and then I'll slide them down on the cable. Okay, can you see that? All right, so get my needles in there again and hold them close together. It's only for a few stitches, so for it just isn't worth it for me to get out those deep ends and get them all on 3 needles and all that. So this is easier. Comes out the same. Slide them down. Works out really good with super bulky yarn because it's big and it's already loose. So there's 2 more sets. And we just have to do it 3 more times and then we'll be all done. There we go. These last ones are usually a little tougher because they do start getting down there on that cable, and sometimes it doesn't stay all that loose. Okay, so that's it. Okay, now we take the stitch marker away. Now, there we are. We have still stitches left on the cable. And I'm just going to cut a piece of yarn, maybe 6 or 8 inches long. I'm going to take this really big tapestry needle. Even the super bulkies fit in there. Okay, now we don't want to have our stitches run away on us or pull out. So let's see. I'm going to have to go down there. There we go. Here is the yarn on the last stitch. And we want to make sure we get up and around that stitch. That'll keep it from pulling out. And I usually take 2 stitches, pull the yarn through, and slide them off the needle. Okay. I'll just keep working it like that. Go for 2 more. Make sure you get the whole stitch on the needle, okay? Because if you split the yarn or you don't catch it all, it'll run. Okay, we don't want that. Alrighty. And then give them a little tug, because the super bulky sometimes has a lot of roving in it, and so it's not twisted tight, and you just don't want that to fuzz out or break on you. Okay, so we got 2 more. Slide those off. Give them a tug. Alright, and then we've got the last 3. So there we go. Alright, so now we're going to pull that tight. And then I put my hand inside the hat, and I go around another time where I try to catch all of those stitches that we just took off and pull the yarn through them once more. Okay, so now we got that nice little flowery star thing going on in the center, and I'm gonna put my needle down and pull it through to the inside. When I get to the inside, I'm gonna weave it under a bunch of stitches, pulling it pretty snug because we don't want that opening to ever come open. But you don't have to tie a knot because it is pretty thick yarn, and it'll kind of felt a little bit if it's got some wool in it. Okay, so there you go. Now I leave a little tail, just because it'll not matter. You won't see that. And there's your hat. It's got a cute top. And because we switched the yarn colors halfway, we got some really awesome like striping in there, and it's a definitely unique hat. And where we did that little trick in the beginning, our edge is nice and straight, so you can't tell if there's a front or back. I hope you have fun with this, and just try lots of different yarns, because even though it's the same pattern, they'll all look different, and they should fit pretty much the same. But if they don't, I'm sure you can find somebody that'll love to have a hat. Okay, have fun knitting.